Hi there. Today we are going to learn how to draft the basic borders for the senator wear. This is how we're going to draft our basic borders for the male. These are the following measurements we are going to need. Our chest is 42, the shoulder to shoulder or the back measurement is 17 and a half. We are doing a cross back of 16 and a half, across chest 15 and a half. The shirt length is 32, around arm 13. And the tummy measurement or the tummy circumference is also 38. We'll first draw a line to represent our starting line. We'll do the shoulder to shoulder or the back measurement. And so it will be the back measurement divided by 2. Our back measurement is 17 and a half. And so 17 and a half divided by 2 is going to give us 8 and 3/4. So we mark it in 8 and 3/4 starting from here towards this direction. We add 1/4 of an inch for fixing our sleeve. Next will be to mark 2 inches below this line. This will serve as our shoulder slope line. We mark 3 inches to serve as our neck width. We then trace this very line we marked down here to touch the shoulder slope line. Then we connect the shoulder slope to the neck width. We will start from the 2 inches line all the way to where we had marked our 3 inches initially. Then we mark 4 inches from this very line down here. This is because we are going to flip this over to meet the front pattern. And so once we raise this by 2 inches, it means we are supposed to double it and then mark it from this line onto another line. We will then go ahead and cut this and that. We will make sure we extend this to surpass this very point because we are going to flip it over. Since our shoulder to shoulder has been distorted, we would mark it all over again and then we add our seam allowance for setting in the sleeve. Remember, this was supposed to be 8 and 3/4 plus a 1/4 seam allowance. With this done, we'll go ahead and mark our arm depth. The arm depth, as we've always said, is our round arm measurement divided by 2 plus 1 inch ease. And so our round arm is 13 and a half divided by 2 gives us 6 and 3/4 plus 1 inch ease, which then gives us 7 and 3/4. On this line, we mark our chest measurement divided by 4 and add our seam allowance. And so the chest measurement is 42 divided by 4 gives us 10 and a half plus 1 inch seam allowance. Then to get our cross back line, we would have to divide our arm depth into 3. We pick one and then starting from the chest line, we move outwards to mark that. And so the arm depth is 7 and 3/4 divided by 3 gives us 2 and a half approximately. Then we input our cross back measurement, which is 16 and a half divided by 2 gives us 8 and 1/4 plus 1/4 of an inch, 8 and a half. With our cross back point, our chest measurement divided by 4 and our shoulder to shoulder, we'll go ahead and construct our armhole to touch these 3 points. Then we move ahead to mark our shoulder to waist, our shoulder to hip, and then our shirt length. I did not actually measure these, and so I'll do 18 inches from the shoulder to waist. I'll add 6 inches to get 24, that is the shoulder to hip, and then our shirt length, which is 32. If you want to be very specific, you can measure this. The tummy was supposed to be 38. So 38 divided by 4 gives us 9.5 plus 1 inch seam allowance. This is serving as our hip line. The hip measurement is same as the chest, 42. So divided by 4 gives us 10.5 plus our 1 inch seam allowance. We export the same measurement we had here also to our hemline. Lest I forget, we have to add on our hem allowance, and so we are doing 2 inches hem. We add that. Then we go ahead to connect these points. Bear in mind, if this was with a client whose belly is as equal as the chest, we would have just moved straight from the chest line all the way to the hip without tapering inward the waistline. Cut this out. We go ahead and draft our front bodice. Next, we are going to trace the outline onto this new paper for our front pattern. After the lines are transferred onto the front pattern, we'll place this on top like this, making sure that we'll be able to join the two shoulders, that is the front and the back shoulders together. We need to add our seam allowance on the top part so that when we join the two, it doesn't fall short. And so we'll add 1/2 inch. Then we cut off the excess. We will then place the front pattern right on the back pattern. This will enable us to get a perfect neck hole. Now, we are marking about 4 inches from the back all the way downwards. We'll then extend this line to meet the 4 inches we just marked here. Then we go ahead and measure the neck circumference to see what we get. We get 7.5, which means we are getting a neck circumference of 15 minus that seam allowance will be taken off when finishing the neck hole, meaning we are getting about 16 or 16.5, and so this is fine. If you get between 7 and 7.5 to 8, it's usually fine for an average body size. We'll go ahead and cut the front neck hole just to meet the back. One other thing we need to take notice of is that the across back measurement was a bit wider than the across chest measurement. And so having our across back measurement transferred to get our across chest line, we would have to input our across chest measurement plus the seam allowance for setting in our sleeve. The across chest measurement was 15.5 divided by 4 gives us 7.75 plus 1/4 inch, which gives us 8 inches. And so we would mark the 8 inches thereof. We'll then move ahead and refine our front armhole. But bear in mind, this would affect the part of the back pattern that flips forward. And so we'll go ahead and cut both this and the front pattern. And so from here we are getting our front and our back patterns. We are going ahead to cut the sleeve. These are the measurements you would need for our sleeve. First, we need the arm depth measurement, which is taken from the top here to this part. And so we measure this. We get 7 3/4. The next, we would also need the armhole measurement. We get 10 1/2. We would need the bicep or the round arm measurement, which was taken on our client. And we'd also need the sleeve length, which was also taken on our client. These are the measurements we'll need for the sleeve. For this suit-like sleeve, we would first use our arm depth measurement. And so we mark our arm depth measurement from this part all the way downwards. Our arm depth measurement was 7 3/4, so we mark that. Then we'll mark our sleeve length, which is 10 inches. So 10 inches plus the 1/4 inch for which we are going to set the sleeve onto the dress. And so it will become 10 1/4. Comes to the sleeve length. The distance from my sleeve cap here all the way to the length is giving me 10 inches. But when it comes to the inseam, from this very part all the way to the length of our seam is also giving us 4 inches. And so we take the 4 inches off the sleeve length and the remainder becomes the depth of our armhole. Whereas this part is giving us 10 1/4, we are taking 4 inches off from this part plus the 1/4 inch seam allowance for setting in our sleeve. We'll then mark 7 inches from the top here all the way towards where we just marked our 4 inches. From the bottom here all the way to where we marked the 7 inches, we'll come up straight. We measure 4 1/2 inches from the fold here all the way to the midline. This line we just marked represents the distance from this very portion all the way to the midsection of our sleeve. Then we draw our cap from this direction all the way to the 4 inches, all the way to the 4 1/2 inches, and we curve inward to also touch the 7 inches we marked at the top here. We then measure the distance from the inseam all the way to the cap head. We get 11 inches. We compare this to our armhole, which was 10 1/2, meaning our sleeve hole is 1/2 inch bigger than the armhole, and this is perfect. Once it ranges between 1/2 and then 1 inch or even 2 inches, it's okay. We go ahead and then we cut this. This is the basic bodice block for the male, usually for senator wear and African wears. And so this is the sleeve that we're going to fix, and then we also have our back and then the front patterns, as you can see. We'll go ahead and then do the modifications if we want to do any other style.